She is standing in the bread line already prepared to be disappointed. Maybe a smaller loaf, maybe coarser flour, maybe the baker cutting slices thinner with his eyes on the queue. Then the gate bells go off hard and fast, and before anyone even asks why, soldiers are in the street pushing people aside so one grain cart can get through. That changes the mood in a breath. A bad market morning turns into people trying to guess whether that was the last cart for a few days, or the last one they will see at all. Some stay planted at the bakehouse because bread in hand feels safer than coins in hand. Others peel off at once. You see women hooking baskets back over their arms, men turning around mid-argument, children getting yanked by the wrist because nobody wants to lose a child in a crowd that has suddenly remembered food. Then the buying starts in that ugly, hurried way. Not graceful market shopping anymore. People stop asking what is fresh and start asking what keeps. Salt first, if they can get it. Oil if they can afford it. Rough grain, beans, anything that can sit in a corner and still be food later. Stall holders stop smiling and start pinching the measures level with a flat hand. They pour slower. They look over shoulders. If someone has good flour, it is suddenly not sitting open where everybody can stare at it. By noon, the market is still there. Same stalls, same mud underfoot, but everything is being handled differently. The loaves on the table are smaller and darker. Better flour is being watched instead of displayed. People who only came out to buy a meal are walking home with bundles tucked under cloaks or tied up in aprons, holding them close against the body. Nobody shows what they got if they can help it. Getting something home gives a little relief. A sack against the hip, a bottle wrapped in cloth, even one extra loaf under the arm settles the breathing for a moment. At least there is something to put on the table tonight. But once the door shuts, that comfort turns awkward almost immediately. The question is no longer what was bought. It is who gets counted against it, and for how long. That night, the counting stops being privated. People from the outer streets show up with blankets, one pot, maybe a child asleep on a shoulder and not much else. So the floor gets cleared and everything comes out where everyone can see it for a minute. Sacks, jars, salt, the little lump of smoked meat somebody thought would last longer if nobody mentioned it. Then they start dividing. Flour gets tied into smaller cloth bundles. Oil is poured off and tucked away. Meat goes down to the cellar hooks before too many people keep looking at it. The rooms change use almost at once. The place where people usually sleep turns into the food room because it has the driest wall and the door that closes properly. Benches get dragged into corners or lined end to end for children. Somebody ends up sleeping near the chest just so nobody can open it without waking them. Bedding spreads where people normally sit to eat, so meals have to happen half standing, passing bowls carefully over rolled blankets and feet. Then the animals become another nuisance. The relatives have brought chickens because leaving them meant losing them, and a goat gets tethered in the courtyard because there is nowhere else. By morning there is straw, droppings, feathers in the damp, and somebody already complaining that the bird noise carries. Nobody wants to turn the animals away, but now the yard is crowded too, and every trip out with a bucket means stepping around somebody else's property. Supper gets adjusted before anyone says the word ration. More water in the pot. Bread cut thinner. People make a show of taking small pieces first, pretending they are not hungry so the children or the new arrivals can have the bigger share. You get that little awkward politeness where everyone says they ate earlier. Nobody believes it, but they all keep saying it. For one night it does feel better packed together. One fire instead of two. One oven heating more mouths. More ears listening if anything happens outside. But crowding eats through things fast. Fuel goes quicker. The latrine fills quicker. People wake each other, cough on each other, hear every floorboard, and start noticing where the household keeps reaching when it needs flour or salt. And once too many people know which room holds the grain, the next problem is already there. If stores are now half shared and half hidden, who still decides when that grain gets taken out and made into bread? At the bakehouse, people start lining up before first light, not because the bread is good, but because being late can cost you the oven. Everybody brings some version of flour that has already been stretched too far. Ground peas, bean meal, bran, whatever will bulk it out. You can see it in the color before it's even mixed. And everybody watches the baker's hands. Not politely either. Eyes fixed on the scoop, the board, the marked dough, making sure their batch does not somehow come back smaller than it went in. So little systems appear almost at once. Scratches on bits of wood, knots in string, initials pressed into dough. Anything to keep one family's lump from becoming another family's loaf. Some households combine batches because a full baking is easier to argue for than 3 small ones. Some send the person who is best at pushing forward without starting a fight. Others bring a little favor with them, a bit of salt, news, help with hauling fuel, hoping the baker remembers who stood useful near the oven. Fuel keeps tightening, so one problem runs straight into the next street. If the oven is hot, everybody wants in at once. If it cools, people wait around with dough going slack in bowls or under cloths. Then tempers lift. Not shouting all the time, more the tight kind of arguing where nobody steps away from their place in line. By then, people are already thinking ahead to the meal after the loaf. Broth gets reboiled. Crumbs get saved instead of brushed off. A heel of bread sits on the shelf until it is hard enough to break into pottage. Meals change without anybody announcing that they have changed. The loaf is darker. The pot is thinner. One bowl becomes 2 smaller ones. Children get sent out to look for nettles, or to pick up dropped grain near carts and storehouses if any can still be found. You start seeing people sell things they would usually keep until the last minute. A belt, a decent knife, a cloak pin, tools with a bit of life left in them. Not in some dramatic scene. Just quiet bargaining before the next price rises again. After a while, the neighborhood falls into a bake rhythm. Complaints at dawn. Waiting. Watching. Carrying loaves home under cloth. Cutting carefully. That routine settles people more than the food does. If you know when to queue, when to mix, when the oven might still be hot, the morning at least has edges to it. But everybody can feel how flimsy that calm is. It depends on flour still appearing, wood still turning up, oven still being usable, and no fresh disruption knocking the whole sequence sideways. So people begin shifting sacks, bowls, and kindling closer to where they sleep, trying to keep food, eat, and safety in the same few cramped spaces, and that starts causing a different kind of trouble. Once people start sleeping down in the cellars, the room stops being just storage. You get mats laid between barrels, children tucked beside sack piles, somebody's cloak hung over a drafty corner to make a little bit of privacy. At first, it feels sensible. If the upper street gets hit, at least everybody's already below. But cellars were meant to hold food, not a whole night's worth of breathing, damp clothes, spilled broth, and restless bodies. After a few days, the stores begin telling on them. Grain sacks pick up wet from the floor. Lids come off jars more often, and whatever was sealed starts smelling of smoke and people. Meat that would have kept better untouched now has to be checked every morning. So they start fussing with everything. Sacks get shifted onto boards or stones. Jars are opened, wiped, closed again. Mold gets cut off cheese and bread with a knife, and the good part kept. Meat is rehung higher if there is a beam for it. That solves one problem and starts another. The food now needs constant handling, and some of it has to go back upstairs where the air is drier. So you get this back and forth all day. Carrying a ham up, bringing a child down, taking beans up to sort, hauling bedding aside so someone can reach the vinegar jar at the rear wall. People begin snapping over the steps because one bundle in the wrong place means nobody can pass cleanly in the dark. When the courtyard is still usable, it turns into the overflow space. A shared fire gets going there. Somebody ties a goat near the wall. A pig is kept where there used to be washing. Pots come out. Scraps are boiled. Smoke drifts back toward the cellar door. And now the shelter smells like cooking grease on top of damp earth and old casks. You wake to coughing, a child crying, an animal fussing. and someone already arguing that the fire is too close to the stacked wood. For a little while, people settle into it. This corner for sleeping. That wall for sacks. Cook before dusk. Keep the best jar behind the third barrel. Don't block the stairs. It almost passes for order. Then one spoiled sack, one kicked-over pot, one courtyard you suddenly cannot use, and the whole arrangement starts slipping at once. And once that happens, people start looking at the next daily problem sitting right there. If everyone is eating, sleeping, and waiting in the same cramped places, where exactly is all the dirty water supposed to go? And what do you do with waste before the place turns on you? A water trip could fall apart halfway through it. You get to the well, finally work your bucket down, and then something starts coming over the wall or through the square and everybody breaks at once. Some leave with nothing. Some haul back a sloshing half bucket, angry because that was meant for washing as much as drinking. Then washing gets dropped, cooking gets cut down, and the pot by the door that was supposed to take slop stays full too long. So people stop treating errands as separate things. If someone is going out, they carry 2 jobs with them. Fetch water, dump waste, ask what line is moving today. Look at which alley is still open. Houses send whoever can move quickest and wait longest without causing trouble. Older men, servant girls, children with cords around their wrists, so they do not lose the pails. People go early, because early sometimes means one quiet draw before the bells, and because once a route closes, the whole day bends around it. Then the little adjustments start. Clean water for drinking first. The water from boiling oats gets saved for wiping bowls. Wash water gets used again on floors or rags. Broken cask hoops get wired back on. Cracked buckets get stuffed with cloth near the seam. Nobody likes lending containers now. Buckets come back late, or not at all, and that is enough to start shouting in a stairwell. Meanwhile, the waste has to go somewhere. If the usual place is too exposed, people edge farther down side lanes behind sheds, near doors they do not use themselves. Before long, whole alleys turn sour. You notice people stepping differently, skirts lifted, shoes picking around wet patches. Windows open less. Eating near the threshold stops. The air indoors is bad, but sometimes outside is worse. After a while, people do learn the shape of it. Which bell means clear the square? Which well is watched? Which wall gives a bit of cover? You see the same faces in the same lines, and that almost settles nerves. Then it only takes one dead animal in a water place, one guard shutting a gate, one stolen cask, and the whole district is guessing again by the hour. And once the water points start running by line, tally, and permission, some people get counted cleanly, and some start surviving by who will wave them through. After a while, the day gets a shape again. People come out at the same hour with the same little bits of marked cloth or parchment, the same bowls, sacks, cracked jugs. They are not happy with the ration, but they are relieved to know when to stand there and what they might carry home. That alone settles people a little. The street gets quieter once everyone knows bread might appear after the bell instead of maybe, somehow, if you push hard enough. Then, the awkward part shows itself. A widow has a nephew sleeping in her room now, but his name is not on her count. Someone kept a hen too long, and now has to hide the noise. A family says the baby should count for a share. Another says an old father cannot stand in line and surely that should not cost him. The scoops get leveled in full view, so every exception turns into a small public argument. People stop pretending not to notice who has one mouth too many. So they work sideways. A baker gets asked to leave the loaf a little heavier. A guard gets greeted by name. A clerk at the church is remembered kindly because he knows which households are short. Someone with better flour trades for mending. Someone else lends oven space at dusk when counting is slack. The favors are small enough to deny if asked. That is usually the point. It does not look like grand smuggling. It looks like a better loaf under a cloak, ale carried in an ordinary jug, onions split into 2 bundles so they seem like nothing, a child sent to knock because children draw less attention. Certain doors open only after a pause. People develop a way of saying, "I was just passing," while already stepping inside. For a few days, sometimes longer, that almost feels workable. There is gossip in the line again. Somebody makes a joke about whose soup is mostly water. Neighbors start planning 2 meals ahead instead of one. Then one store of grain turns sour, or a room gets taken for soldiers, or a hearth fire runs where houses are packed too close, or the week simply stretches longer than the food did, and all that neat order suddenly has to give somewhere. You cut portions again, give up space again, hide less or hide more, and wait to see whether the next knock is the useful one or the bad one.